Edward, thank you very, very much. So are President Trump's negotiating tactics on trade actually working? To Real Clear Markets editor John Tamny, a former finance chair for Ted Cruz, Hal Lambert, National Taxpayers Union senior fellow Maddie Doppler, and market watcher John Layfield. Maddie, let me start with you. Listen, the market's now sort of ignoring all the headlines and zigzagging back and forth. I think maybe everyone's sort of just wanting these meetings to happen and something to come about it. But are we encouraged that that could actually be the case?
Well, Charles, I think that when you look at the administration and what they're doing now, you have to ask, what is the end goal here? At the beginning of the Trump administration, there was a lot of talk about both tariffs and NAFTA. And the question remains now, which one is really the serious negotiating tactic? I would argue that NAFTA still remains a goal for this administration to accomplish, and tariffs seem to be the means by which they think a lot of their trade goals can come to fruition. But both NAFTA and I would argue the discussion with North Korea and how that plays out are big objectives that this administration wants to still pursue, but they have large trade ramifications. So I think all observers want to know what the administration will do and what tools they will use to pursue both those goals.
John, to that point, that we have seen some overtures from China, including the lowering their auto tariffs. That announcement that is going to happen very soon. But where do you see this heading right now?
Well, hopefully,
I don't see it really heading anywhere.
I'm sorry, I meant John Tamny, but go ahead, Layfield, since you're bigger than everybody else here.
Well, I'm in the Bermuda Triangle, so I have a problem with audio, apparently. Look, I think that the problem we had during the election campaign was people were worried about trade tariffs and border-adjusted tax. Border-adjusted tax didn't happen. Trade tariffs, it looked like they could happen. I don't think they will. We sent our best team over there to China. They brought back absolutely nothing. We're seeing some incremental changes, and I think that's what we'll see with China. The real problem with China is the theft of intellectual property, and I'm not sure how we can deal with that. I don't think tariffs the answer. I don't think the markets think that's the answer either, but I think the markets now believe that's just rhetoric.
All right, John Tamny. Well, Layfield just mentioned the election. During the election, President Trump actually did articulate using tariff wars and things like that to fight back against China. So the folks who put him in office, said they can deal with it. They can handle paying more Walmart for the plastic stuff, including TVs. But is it working? Do you think these negotiations will yield anything substantial?
I hope not, because tariffs by definition injure the American people. The sole reason we get up in the morning is to get in return for our work. So tariffs would raise the prices for all Americans. Let's also remember, when we can't buy as much from Chinese producers, they can't buy as much from us. And that's important because Apple sells 20% of its iPhones in China. Boeing sells 1/4 of its planes. There are more Starbucks in Shanghai than all of New York City. GM sells more cars in China than it does in North America. To war with China is to war on every single American.
By the same token, Hal, would that be another reason, though, to force them, or at least make them open up their markets even more? Despite the success Apple has there, I think is a number 4 or 5 smartphone manufacturer. Maybe if there's even a more level playing field, we can do better.
Oh, absolutely, Charles. What we're seeing here is an America First trade negotiation, which we haven't seen in years. So the markets are a little nervous. They're nervous about it. The American people are watching this, but President Trump's doing the right thing, because what's really hurting the American workers is the property theft, the lack of open markets in China. It's really bad for America.
So having said that, how do we square the issue of effectively putting ZTE out of business and then resuscitating them, and even President Trump tweeting about creating jobs in China? How does that get back toward being an America First policy?
Well, it's all part of the negotiations that are going on right now. And so we don't all know what's going on behind the scenes. But President Trump is taking a stick to these negotiations. And we've been taking carrots for years and years and years. And China's been gorging themselves on our carrots. Maddie, so we're finally going to have a stick going. And he's going to keep the stick there. And those sticks are tariffs.
All right, Maddie,
the same thing with NAFTA.
Maddie, if you can, how could an ultimate trade deal look? Because I think China, which is obviously trying to grow its domestic economy, to John Tamny's point, probably wouldn't mind lower tariffs so that they could actually afford and get more purchasing power. So I would suspect that we'll get something where we could take a victory lap, and maybe they could as well.
Well, yeah, I think that the best trade agreement is the one that is as fair and as free as possible. And to Tammany's point, you look at the Chinese economy. This is a country that has 1.4 billion people. That is a gigantic consumer base. So, of course, we want our American companies to be able to access that. But we also want to make sure that we're looking at China as a rival, which it certainly is in this circumstance. The United States is the largest nominal economy in the world, and it can continue to be so if we play smart and we make sure that American companies can compete globally. And by making sure that our practices here at home, both when it comes to trade, when it comes to tax, when it comes to regulatory reform, making sure those are as robust as possible ensures that both American businesses and taxpayers win.
Guys, I want to shift gears a little bit because the market was smoked pretty good yesterday on this whole thing with Italy and that political crisis there. Layfield, how dangerous do you think this could become for global markets, including ours?
I don't think it's as dangerous as the markets. I think the markets overreacted. I think they wanted something to react to yesterday coming back from a long holiday. I think they overreacted. Look, Brexit looked like it was going to be something dire. It doesn't look like it's going to be now. There is this anti-establishment phase, anti-incumbent phase going on around the entire Western world. So, Italy, I don't think they're going to drop out of the euro, but they certainly could. The Northern Party is gaining power. As you've documented, that's the party that they want to get out of the euro. People don't like being ruled by nameless, faceless bureaucrats in Belgium. That's what people in England and Britain were saying. I think there's a chance they could. I don't think it's going to completely roil markets. If France started talking about getting out of the euro, that's where things get really bad.
John Tamny, Steve Bannon is over there. He's become something of a chief advisor to the Northern League, and they've gained tremendous momentum, and it's echoing across the continent. There's no doubt about that. More than the economics of it, if we saw this, the establishment lose their power, lose their grip, what would the economic implications be?
I think we vastly overrate it, and let me explain. Italy can leave the euro, but it cannot leave the euro. For any company in Italy to try to borrow money in global markets, it will still be borrowing euros, dollars, yen, you name it. All Italy would be doing would be making itself a less attractive place simply because it would essentially isolate itself from a currency. It'd be the equivalent of West Virginia suddenly issuing its own currency instead of the dollar. It would do nothing for Italy's economy. And so what's dangerous here is not that a bank defaults in Italy or anything like that, or the bank declines. What's dangerous is that government intervenes and gets in the way of the natural way of people working together.
How, on the other end of that, some are saying, hey, the government intervened yesterday and deliberately tripped up these markets is something that was sort of echoed by the German minister who made a quote overnight that maybe the folks in Germany have learned their lesson. The markets were roiled. They were badly damaged. And people are worried about that. I mean, you already have a bureaucrat in Italy who appointed a finance minister who was not elected by the people there. Now we're talking about yet another election. In this country, we talk constitutional crisis a lot. Forgetting about the economics of it, if the will of the people isn't heard or adhered to, that could be devastating, couldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what we're seeing is populism, and populism is rising around the world. But I mean, the biggest problem is that Europe is a socialist bloc in general. And so Italy is just simply a symptom of an economic policy that doesn't work as a bloc. I mean, they've benefited from our protections militarily for years. They don't have to spend any money on the military. Italy has 11% unemployment rate. Their economic growth is below where it was in 2007. So of course they're upset, and they've got representatives that are not following through with the things that they said they would. So you're going to see more of this. I think in the short term it was an overreaction, but in the long term it's serious problems for Europe and and many of the countries in the Euro bloc.
Yeah, Europe has some serious issues. I go back to Tiffany's earnings and you look at where all the growth was, where all the profits are being generated, and every time these quarterly earnings come out for a company like that, Europe fades further and further off the page, if you will. Real quick, Layfield, these markets from here, range bound, but they show resolve every time we think they're going to break down. Is that a good signal?
It's a great signal, Charles. We had the best earnings when you talk about earnings beat since 1994. It was an absolute incredible blow-away earnings season. This tax cut is starting to take effect. I think the economy and the markets fortunately are now trading on the fundamentals of the economy, not necessarily the president's Twitter or what's going on in geopolitics around the world. That is a good thing for the market to trade on that.
Guys, you were a fantastic panel. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.